He said nobody would marry me. She cried until the Mafia boss called her, his wife in public. The rain in Grey Ridge did not wash the city clean. It only made the grime on the sidewalks slicker and the neon signs of the struggling businesses reflect deeper into the puddles. For 27-year-old Maya Ellis, the rain was just one more thing to endure. One more heavy, wet blanket over a life that felt like it was slowly suffocating her. Inside the daily grind, the coffee shop where she spent the better part of her waking life, the air smelled of burnt beans and damp coats. Maya wiped down the counter for the 100th time that evening, her back aching in a dull, rhythmic throb. She had worked a double shift today, just as she had yesterday, and just as she would tomorrow. The rent on her small apartment was 2 weeks overdue, and the stack of medical bills for her mother's ongoing treatment sat on her kitchen table like a silent judge. "Excuse me," a voice snapped, sharp and impatient. Maya jolted, looking up to see a man in an expensive raincoat tapping a credit card against the countertop. "I have been standing here for 5 minutes," he said, his lip curling in a sneer. "Are you stupid or just slow?" "I am so sorry, sir," Maya said, her voice automatic. "Practiced. I was just cleaning the steamer. What can I get for you?" The man rolled his eyes, muttering something under his breath about unskilled labor, but the look he gave her, dismissive, cold, as if she were something stuck to the bottom of his shoe, pierced right through her fatigue. It was not the customer that hurt. It was the echo he triggered. Suddenly, the cafe faded. The smell of coffee was replaced by the scent of stale beer and cheap cologne. She was back in that cramped hallway with Trevor. 3 years ago. She had just found the texts on his phone, the proof that he had been sleeping with someone else for months. She had asked him, crying, why he did it. She had asked why she was not enough. Trevor had laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. "You are barely enough for a weekend." "Maya," he had said, leaning in close so she could smell the liquor on his breath. "Look at you. You are boring. You are plain. Nobody would ever marry you." The memory hit her with the force of a physical blow. The customer was still ordering, listing off a complicated latte with specific temperatures, but Maya could only hear Trevor's voice looping in her mind. "Nobody would ever marry you." "Miss?" the customer barked. Maya blinked, forcing herself back to the present. She took the order, her hands trembling as she punched the numbers into the register. When the man finally left, taking his drink without a thank you, Maya asked her coworker to cover the front for 5 minutes. She slipped into the employee restroom and locked the door. The space was small, smelling of bleach and mildew. She leaned her back against the cool tile and slid down until she was crouching on the floor. She pressed her hands over her mouth to stifle the sob that was climbing up her throat. "Nobody would ever marry you," she mouthed silently into her palms. It felt true. Every bad date since then, every man who had looked right through her, every bill she could not pay, it all felt like evidence that Trevor was right. She was unlovable. She was destined to struggle alone until she simply faded away. She washed her face with cold water, scrubbing until her skin was pink, and forced herself to go back out. She had to finish her shift. She needed the tips. 2 hours later, the bell above the door chimed, but it was not a customer. It was Eli. Her younger brother looked like a ghost. His skin was pale and clammy, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat and rain. But it was the bruise blooming purple across his left cheekbone that made Maya's heart stop. "Eli!" she gasped, rushing out from behind the counter. She pulled him toward the corner table, away from the few remaining patrons. What happened? Eli flinched when she reached for his face. "I am fine. Maya, it is nothing. It is not nothing," she hissed, keeping her voice low. "Who did this to you?" He would not meet her eyes. He picked at the peeling laminate on the table, his leg bouncing nervously. "I messed up. Maya, I messed up bad." Maya felt a cold pit open in her stomach. Eli had always been impulsive, always chasing the next big win, convinced he was smarter than the system. "How much? Eli?" He swallowed hard. "I was playing at that underground club on 4th Street. I was up. Maya, I swear, I was going to pay off Mom's bills. I was going to get you out of this place. How much? She repeated, her voice hard. $50,000. The number hung in the air between them, impossible and heavy. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. 50,000, she whispered. Eli, we do not have $50 to spare. Who do you owe? He looked up then, and the terror in his eyes was absolute. Vescari. The house is run by the Vescari family. Maya gripped the edge of the table. Everyone in Grey Ridge knew the Vescari name. They owned half the construction firms in the city, the shipping yards, and the high-end clubs. They were the law in the shadows. They gave me 48 hours, Eli said, his voice cracking. I can fix it. Maya, I just need time. I can find another game. No, Maya said sharply, no more games. You will get yourself killed. I have to try. Go home, Eli, she said, standing up. Her legs felt unsteady. Go to Mom's. Lock the door. Do not come out. Where are you going? He asked, grabbing her wrist. I have to finish my shift. She lied. Go. Now. She watched him run out into the rain, looking small and pathetic. That night, when she finally dragged herself back to her own apartment, she saw the white envelope slipping out from under her door. There was no stamp, just her name, written in elegant, sharp script. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Mr. Ellis seems to have trouble understanding deadlines. Perhaps his sister can explain the concept of consequences. Vescari's lounge, midnight, come alone, or we come for him. Maya looked at the clock on her microwave. It was 11:15. She did not call the police. In this neighborhood, calling the police on the Vescari family was a faster way to die than the dead itself. She went to her closet and pulled out the only nice dress she owned, a black wrap dress she had bought for a funeral 2 years ago. It was modest, fading slightly at the seams, but it was all she had. She put on her coat, grabbed her purse, and walked back out into the rain. She would not let them hurt Eli. She did not know what she could do, but she knew she was the only thing standing between her brother and a grave. Vescari's lounge was a fortress of dark glass and polished stone in the center of the city's nightlife district. The bouncer at the door did not ask for her ID. He simply looked at her face, checked a list in his head, and opened the heavy velvet rope. Inside, the world changed. The noise of the street vanished, replaced by the low hum of jazz and the clink of crystal. The air smelled of expensive leather, cigar smoke, and power. Men in suits that cost more than Maya's yearly salary sat in plush booths, speaking in low voices. A woman in a sharp business suit approached her. Miss Ellis, follow me. Maya followed her through the main room, up a floating staircase, and down a hallway lined with black and white photographs of the city's history. The woman opened a set of double doors at the end of the hall and stepped aside. Maya walked in. The office was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rain-slicked city. A large mahogany desk dominated the room. Behind it sat a man who seemed to absorb the light around him. Domenico Vescari, Dom, to the few who dared, was looking at a file on his desk. He did not look up immediately. Maya stood in the center of the Persian rug, feeling small and frayed in her cheap coat. Dom was terrifyingly handsome. That was the first thing she noticed, and it unsettled her more than a scar or a snarl would have. He had broad shoulders that strained the fabric of a tailored black suit. His hair was dark, brushed back from a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. When he finally lifted his eyes to hers, they were dark, intelligent, and completely unreadable. Sit, he said. His voice was a deep baritone, calm and controlled. Maya sat in the leather chair opposite him. She kept her hands in her lap, clenching them together to stop them from shaking. You are the sister, Dom said. He closed the file. Maya Ellis, no criminal record, 2 jobs, pays taxes. You are remarkably boring, Miss Ellis. I am here for my brother, Maya said. Her voice wavered, and she hated herself for it. She cleared her throat and tried again. I am here to arrange a payment plan for Eli. Dom leaned back in his chair, studying her. A payment plan. Your brother owes $50,000. Based on your income at the coffee shop and the cleaning service, it would take you 10 years to pay that back. And that was assuming I do not charge interest. I will work more. Maya said quickly. "I will get a third job, please. He's just a kid. He's 25, a voice said from the corner of the room, old enough to know better. Maya turned to see another man standing in the shadows. He was shorter than Dom, but stockier, with a cruel mouth and restless energy. This was Luca, Dom's second in command. Luca stepped into the light, sneering at her. "He is a degenerate gambler, and he is a liar, and you look pathetic begging for him." The insult landed like a slap. Pathetic. It was too close to nobody. Maya felt a flash of heat rise up her neck. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "He's not a bad person," she said, her voice rising. "He is stupid. Yes, he's desperate. But he's not bad. And I am not begging. I am taking responsibility, which is more than most people do." Luca laughed, a harsh sound. "You think you are tough? You are nothing, a little waitress playing in the big leagues. No wonder you are alone. Who would want to deal with this mess?" The words echoed in her head. "Nobody would ever marry you." "I said back off," Maya snapped, turning to face Luca fully. "Enough." The single word from behind the desk silenced the room instantly. Dom had not shouted, but the command was absolute. Dom stood up. He was taller than she had realized, towering over the desk. He walked around it slowly, his eyes fixed on Luca. "She is a guest." "Luca," Dom said quietly, "you will speak to her with respect, or you will not speak at all. Step outside, but boss, now." Luca glared at Maya one last time, then turned and stormed out of the office, slamming the heavy door behind him. Silence rushed back into the room, thick and heavy. Maya remained standing, her chest heaving, the adrenaline beginning to crash into exhaustion. She felt exposed, raw. Dom watched her. He had seen the way she stood up to Luca, the way her chin had lifted even though her hands were trembling. He had expected tears immediately. He had not expected fire. "Please." "Sit down," Dom said, his tone different now, softer though still guarded. Maya sank back into the chair. She felt like the strings holding her together were snapping one by one. "My brother," she whispered. "I know he owes you. I know he made a mistake. But please, do not hurt him. I will do whatever it takes to pay it back." Dom leaned against the front of his desk, crossing his arms. He was close to her now. She could smell his cologne, sandalwood and something sharp, like cold winter air. "Why?" Dom asked. "Why defend him so fiercely? He put you in this position. He gambled away money he did not have and left you to clean up the mess. Most people would cut him loose." "He is my brother," Maya said, staring at her hands. "He's all I have." "Is he?" Dom asked. "No partner, no husband to help you carry this." The question was casual, but it broke the dam. "No," Maya said, her voice sounding brittle. "No husband." Dom tilted his head slightly, observing her. "Why not? You are young. You are capable." Maya let out a short, bitter laugh that turned into a sob before she could stop it. The stress, the fear, the exhaustion, and the humiliation of the night finally overwhelmed her. Because she choked out, tears spilling over her lashes and tracking hot paths down her cheeks. "Because nobody would ever marry me." She covered her face with her hands, mortified. She was crying in front of a mafia boss. She was showing weakness to a predator. Trevor said it. She babbled, the words tumbling out of her uncontrollably. "My ex. He said nobody would ever marry me. He said I was nothing, and he was right. Look at me. I am here, begging for my brother's life, and I have nothing to offer you. I am just nobody." She waited for the laughter. She waited for Dom to mock her, just like Trevor had, just like the customer at the cafe had. Instead, she saw a hand enter her field of vision. She looked up, blinking through her tears. Dom was holding out a handkerchief. It was white, crisp, and embroidered with his initials. "Take it," he said gently. Maya took the cloth, wiping her eyes. She sniffled, trying to compose herself, but her breath was still hitching. "Who told you that?" Dom asked. His voice was low, a rumble in his chest. "My ex-boyfriend," she whispered. Dom's expression did not change, but his eyes darkened. The air around him seemed to grow colder, but not toward her. "A man who insults a woman to make himself feel big is not a man," Dom said. "He is a coward, and his opinion is worth less than the dirt on my shoe." Maya looked at him. Startled by the intensity in his tone, he was looking at her with a strange focus, as if he were seeing her for the first time, not as a debtor, but as a woman. There was a silence then, but it was not empty. It was charged. Maya became acutely aware of how close his legs were to hers, of the sheer size of him. She felt a strange flutter in her chest, a mixture of fear and something else, something that felt dangerously like attraction. "Thank you," she whispered. Dom straightened up, walking back behind his desk. He sat down and laced his fingers together. "I have a proposition for you. Miss Ellis." Maya stiffened. "A proposition?" "I am willing to restructure your brother's debt," Dom said. "I will freeze the interest. I will call off the collectors. I will ensure that no one touches a hair on his head." "What do I have to do?" Maya asked, dread coiling in her stomach. Dom watched her carefully. "I need something from you. Not money. I have plenty of money. I need an image. I do not understand," Maya said. "My business is expanding," Dom explained. "I am moving into more legitimate sectors, city contracts, real estate development, but my reputation precedes me. The city council, the investors, they see a monster, they see a thug." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her face. "I need to soften that image. I need to appear stable, respectable, family-oriented." Maya's heart began to pound against her ribs. "What are you saying?" "I need a partner," Dom said, "a public partner, someone who looks innocent, hardworking, and honest, someone who makes me look human by association." He leaned forward. "I want you to be that person, Maya. I want you to attend events with me, dinners, galas. You will be seen on my arm. You will smile. You will let people believe we are together." Maya stared at him. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" Dom nodded once. "In public, in private. You are free to do as you please. You keep your job, your apartment, but when I call, you answer. You stand beside me, and you act like you want to be there. And if I do this," Maya asked. "If you do this," Dom said, "Eli's debt is suspended. If you stick with it for 6 months, I will wipe the debt clean. $50,000, gone, and I will guarantee your family's safety." Maya looked at him. He was dangerous. He was a criminal. He was offering her a deal with the devil. But she thought of Eli's bruised face. She thought of the menacing note. She thought of the crushing weight of the debt that would never go away on a barista's wage. And she thought of Trevor's voice. "Nobody would ever marry you." Here was a man, a powerful, terrifying man, who was asking her to stand beside him. Even if it was a lie, he was choosing her. Maya took a deep breath. She smoothed the skirt of her cheap dress. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I will do it." Dom Vescari did not smile, but the tension in his shoulders eased. He nodded, a solemn acknowledgement of the contract they had just struck. "Good," he said. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a sleek, black cell phone. He slid it across the mahogany surface toward her. "Keep this on you at all times. I will contact you tomorrow with details. My driver is waiting downstairs to take you home." Maya took the phone. It felt cold and heavy in her hand. She stood up, her legs still shaky. "Thank you, Mr. Vescari. Dom." She paused at the door. "Call me Dom," he said. "If we are going to convince the city we are in love, we should start with first names." Maya looked back at him one last time. He was watching her, his dark eyes unreadable, searching her face. "Good night, Dom," she said softly. She walked out of the office and down the hallway, past the pictures of the city's history. She stepped into the elevator, clutching the phone to her chest. As the doors closed, she realized her heart was racing not just from fear, but from a strange, terrifying thrill. She had walked in as a nobody. She was walking out as the property of the Vescari family, and for the first time in years, she did not feel invisible. She felt seen. The transition to her new life happened with the jarring speed of a car crash. One day. Maya was placing buckets under the leak in her kitchen ceiling, listening to her neighbors scream at each other through the paper-thin walls. The next, she was standing in the center of a one-bedroom apartment on the 10th floor of a building she had walked past 1,000 times, but never dared to enter. The space was modest, Dom had promised, but to Maya, it felt like a palace. The floors were polished hardwood, the windows were double-paned to shut out the city noise, and the furniture was sleek and comfortable. It was safe. It was clean. It was terrifying. She stood by the window, looking down at the street below. A discreet black sedan was parked across the road. A doorman named Arthur, who had shoulders like a linebacker and eyes that missed nothing, stood in the lobby. She knew that if she tried to leave, Arthur would politely ask where she was going and likely radio ahead. She felt an immense wave of relief that Eli was safe, that the debt collectors would not come knocking. But beneath the relief was a cold, creeping sensation of entrapment. She had sold her freedom. She was a bird in a gilded cage, and the key was in the pocket of a man who ran the city's criminal underworld. Her phone buzzed on the granite countertop. It was not her old, cracked smartphone. It was the new device Dom had given her, a slim, matte black model with only a few numbers pre-programmed into it. "I trust the apartment is adequate." Dom's voice came through the speaker. Low and rich. "It is beautiful," Maya said, hating how small her voice sounded in the empty room. "Thank you, but I feel like I'm intruding. It is one of my properties." "Maya," he replied, his tone dismissing her gratitude. It was sitting empty. Now it serves a purpose. "Arthur is downstairs. The building has 24-hour surveillance. You are safe there." "Safe," she repeated. The silence on the line stretched for a moment. "I need you ready at 7 o'clock tonight," Dom said, the business tone returning. "There is a fundraiser for Councilman Reed. It will be our first public appearance. A dress has been sent to your door." "Okay," she whispered. "I will be ready. Call me if anything feels wrong," he added, his voice dropping an octave, becoming less like a boss and more like a guardian. "Anything at all. Do you understand?" "I understand." When the line went dead, Maya stared at the phone. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the wind to push her over. The dress was a deep, midnight blue. It was silk, simple in its cut but devastating in its fit. It draped over her body like water, clinging to her waist and flaring slightly at the hips. It was elegant, understated, and far more expensive than anything she had ever touched, let alone worn. Maya stood in front of the full-length mirror in the hallway. She had pulled her hair back into a loose, low bun, leaving a few tendrils to frame her face. She applied the minimal makeup she owned, trying to hide the dark circles under her eyes. She looked different. She looked like someone who belonged in a high-rise apartment. She looked like someone who could be the partner of a powerful man. But inside, the voice of her ex-boyfriend, Trevor, whispered like a draft in a cold room. "Who are you trying to fool? You are just a waitress in a borrowed dress. When midnight comes, the carriage turns back into a pumpkin." The intercom buzzed. Arthur's voice announced that Mr. Vescari was waiting. Maya took a deep breath, smoothed her hands over the cool silk of the dress, and walked out the door. The evening air was crisp as she stepped out of the lobby. The black sedan was waiting at the curb, the back door already open. Dom was standing beside it, talking to his driver. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw her. For a long, agonizing second. He did not move. He just looked at her. His gaze started at her face, traveled down the length of the blue dress, and returned to her eyes. It was not the leering look she was used to from men at the coffee shop. It was heavy. It was absorbing. It felt like he was memorizing her. Dom wore a tuxedo that fit him with lethal precision, the stark black and white emphasizing the tan of his skin and the darkness of his eyes. He looked dangerous, even in formal wear, perhaps especially in formal wear. Maya stopped a few feet away, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Is it okay?" she asked, her hands twisting nervously. "The dress, Dom blinked, as if waking from a trance. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. The scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and cold air enveloped her immediately. He offered his arm, his elbow bent, waiting for her. "You look perfect," he murmured, his voice rougher than usual. The word shivered down her spine. Perfect. No one had ever used that word to describe her. Cute, maybe. Useful. Available. But never perfect. Maya reached out and slid her hand into the crook of his arm. His muscles were hard as iron beneath the expensive fabric of his jacket. "Thank you," she breathed. "Get in," he said softly, guiding her toward the car. "We have a show to put on." The fundraiser was held in the ballroom of the Grand Hotel. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over the crowd. Waiters moved like ghosts through the throngs of people carrying silver trays of champagne. Maya felt the urge to turn around and run the moment they stepped through the double doors. The room was filled with the city's elite, politicians, real estate moguls, old money families. These were people who would never look twice at her if she were pouring their coffee. She felt her posture slump, her chin tucking down instinctively. Dom's hand, which had been resting lightly on her elbow, slid around to the small of her back. His palm was warm through the silk of her dress. He applied a gentle, firm pressure, not pushing her, but grounding her. "Chin up," he whispered, his lips barely moving near her ear. "You belong here because you are with me." She straightened, drawing strength from his solid presence at her side. They moved through the crowd, and Maya watched the way the room reacted to Dom. Conversations paused, heads turned, eyes widened with a mixture of respect and fear. Dom introduced her simply. "This is Maya." He offered no other explanation, no pedigree, no job title. And because he was Domenico Vescari, no one dared to ask. They shook her hand, smiled politely, and turned their attention back to him, eager to curry favor. For the first hour, Maya felt like a prop. She smiled until her cheeks hurt. She sipped champagne she did not want. She stood close to Dom, acutely aware of his body heat, of the way he would occasionally shift his stance to shield her from the jostling crowd. Then, a man separated himself from a group near the bar and beelined for them. He was older, with a florid face and eyes that roamed over Maya's body with the subtlety of a searchlight. Maya recognized him vaguely from the local news, a developer named Mr. Henderson. "Vescari," Henderson boomed, his voice too loud. "I heard you bought the old warehouse district. Aggressive move. Business," Dom said coolly, his hand tightening slightly on Maya's waist. "And who is the lovely decoration?" Henderson asked, turning his watery gaze fully onto Maya. He stepped too close, invading her personal space. The smell of scotch was overpowering. "Maya Ellis," Maya said, forcing a polite smile. "Pleasure," Henderson said. He reached out and took her hand, holding it a few seconds too long, his thumb stroking the back of her knuckles. "You are a fresh face. I haven't seen you on the circuit. If you get bored of the dark and brooding type, let me know. I have a yacht docked down at the marina. Much more fun than a warehouse." He winked. It was clumsy and disgusting. Maya froze. She tried to pull her hand back, but his grip was clammy and tight. She felt a flash of panic, the old helplessness rising up. She waited for Dom to laugh, to play along, to treat her like the hired help she effectively was. Suddenly, the air temperature around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dom moved. It was a subtle shift, but it was menacing. He released Maya's waist and stepped forward, positioning his broad shoulder between Maya and the developer. His hand clamped over Henderson's wrist, the one holding Maya, and squeezed. Henderson flinched, his eyes widening as he looked up at Dom. "Mr. Henderson," Dom said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "You seem confused. I was just being friendly." "Dom," Henderson stammered, trying to pull his hand away. "You were being disrespectful," Dom corrected. "This is not a decoration. This is Maya, and she is under my protection." He said the word protection with a weight that suggested violence. It was a territorial claim. It was possessive. Dom released the man's wrist with a dismissive flick. "Walk away," Dom ordered. "Before I forget that we are in polite company." Henderson turned pale. He mumbled an apology to the floor and scrambled away into the crowd. Maya stood rooted to the spot, her heart racing. Her hand, the one Henderson had touched, was trembling. Dom turned to her immediately. His expression was dark, his jaw clenched, but when he looked at her, the anger vanished, replaced by concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, low. "I am fine," she said, her voice shaking. "Thank you." Dom did not smile. He reached out and took her hand, the same one Henderson had sullied, and tucked it securely into the crook of his arm. He pulled her closer than before, his side pressing firmly against hers. "Stay close to me," he commanded softly, "for the rest of the night." He did not let go of her. When men looked at her, Dom met their gaze with a cold, flat stare that made them look away. When they walked, his arm was a heavy, warm weight around her waist. Maya knew it was part of the act. She knew he was selling the image of the protective boyfriend, but as she leaned into him, feeling the solid thump of his heart against her arm, she felt a flush of pride. For the first time in her life, she was not the girl men laughed at. She was the girl the most dangerous man in the room was ready to fight for. The ride back to her apartment was quiet. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, leaving Maya feeling exhausted and strangely raw. Dom did not take her to the after party. He told the driver to head straight to her building. He sat beside her in the dark leather interior, staring out the window, his hand resting on his thigh. He seemed deep in thought. When the car pulled up to the curb, Dom got out and walked her to the lobby door. He waved Arthur away, walking her all the way to the elevator, and then, surprisingly, riding up with her. He walked her to her apartment door. The hallway was silent. "Thank you," Maya said, turning to face him. She fiddled with the small clutch purse in her hands. "For tonight, and for what you did with that man. You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Dom said. His voice was gravelly. "No one disrespects you when you are with me." Maya looked up at him. He was standing so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. The hallway light cast shadows across his sharp cheekbones. He looked tired, the mask of the ruthless boss slipping just enough to show the man underneath. "It meant a lot to me," she whispered. Most men would have laughed." Dom looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "Then they are fools." The silence stretched, thick and heavy. The air between them felt charged, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. Maya's heart began to beat a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She looked at his mouth. She couldn't help it. His lips were firm, sculpted. She felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, safety, and a sudden overwhelming attraction that had nothing to do with the deal they had made. Without thinking, driven by an impulse she could not name, Maya took a half-step closer. She was now inches from him. The movement was small, but it was an invitation. Dom went still. He did not pull away. He watched her, his gaze dropping to her lips and then back up to her eyes. He was waiting. He was giving her the chance to back down. When she didn't move, he slowly raised his hand. His fingers were rough, calloused from years of doing things she didn't want to think about, but his touch was incredibly gentle. He cupped the side of her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone, brushing away a stray curl of hair. Maya leaned into his palm, her eyes fluttering shut. His hand was warm, grounding. She felt safe. She felt wanted. She opened her eyes. Dom was watching her with an intensity that made her knees weak. He was asking a question without speaking. Maya let out a shaky breath and nodded, a microscopic dip of her chin. Dom lowered his head slowly. The first kiss was not a devouring. It was a question. His lips brushed hers, soft and tentative, testing the waters. Maya's breath hitched. She had expected him to be aggressive, demanding. Instead, he was careful. She responded, pressing back slightly, her lips parting. A low sound rumbled in Dom's throat. His other hand came up to her waist, pulling her flush against him. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her. Maya's hands found the lapels of his tuxedo jacket, clutching the fabric to steady herself. The kiss deepened. It became firmer, hungrier. Dom's mouth moved against hers with a skill that made her head spin. He tasted of champagne and danger. His hand on her waist tightened, his fingers splaying across the small of her back, pulling her into the hard wall of his chest. For a moment, the world dissolved. There was no debt, no Vescari crime family, no insecurity. There was just the heat of his body, the roughness of his chin against hers, and the overwhelming sensation of being held by someone who could crush the world but was choosing to hold her gently. Then, Dom stiffened. He pulled back. It was not a rejection, it was a restraint. He broke the kiss, but didn't go far. He rested his forehead against hers, his breathing heavy and ragged. His hands were still on her, gripping her waist as if he was afraid to let go, but knew he had to. Maya gasped for air, her eyes opening. She was dizzy. Her lips felt swollen and sensitized. She started, but her voice failed her. Dom closed his eyes for a second, composing himself. When he opened them, the dark, unreadable mask was sliding back into place, though his eyes were still burning. "I should go," he said, his voice rough. Maya blinked, the reality of the situation crashing back in. She had just kissed her boss, the Mafia boss, the man who owned her brother's debt. "I am sorry," she stammered, stepping back. Her face burned. "I know this is just a deal. I know we are just pretending. I got carried away." Dom straightened, smoothing his jacket. He looked at her, and for a second, he looked almost pained. He took a step toward her, then stopped. "I am not good at pretending, Maya," he said quietly. "Not with you." The admission hung in the air. It was a confession, stark and terrifying. Maya stared at him, her heart skipping a beat. It thrilled her, and it terrified her. If he wasn't pretending, then the danger was real. The stakes were real. I need to think," she whispered. Dom nodded slowly. He understood boundaries, even if he broke every other law. He took a step back, his hands flexing at his sides as if physically resisting the urge to reach out and touch her again. "Good night, Maya," he said. "Good night, Dom." He turned and walked down the hallway toward the elevator. Maya watched him go, touching her fingertips to her lips, which still tingled with the phantom pressure of his kiss. The next 3 days were a blur of anxiety. Maya went to work at the cafe, trying to act normal, but she felt like her skin was too tight. Every time the door chimed, she looked up, expecting to see him, but Dom did not come. Instead, the shadows around her seemed to deepen. On Tuesday, she noticed a gray sedan parked 2 blocks from the cafe. It sat there for 4 hours. When she took out the trash, the man in the driver's seat turned his head slowly to watch her. He did not look like one of Dom's men. Dom's men wore suits and looked like security. This man looked like a shark in a cheap leather jacket. When she left work that evening, she saw 2 of Dom's usual bodyguards, but they were not alone. There were 2 more. They were flanking her, walking closer than usual. "What is going on?" she asked the nearest one, a man named Russo. "Just precautions. Miss Ellis," Russo said, scanning the street. "Boss's orders. Do not walk alone. Anywhere." Maya felt a cold curl of fear in her stomach. That night, she was at her new apartment. The silence, usually a luxury, felt oppressive. She paced the living room. She heard Dom's voice coming from the hallway. He must have been visiting the building's security office. She cracked her door open a sliver. He was standing by the elevator, phone pressed to his ear. He looked furious. "I do not care what the Carlos think," Dom snarled into the phone. "They are sniffing around the old neighborhood. They know I moved her." He paused, listening. "No," he said, his voice dropping to a lethal hiss. "The woman is off limits. You tell the boys that if they see a single Carlo car near her cafe, they burn it. I am not using her as bait anymore. She is the priority. Do you understand? The priority." He hung up and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed before he saw her. Maya leaned back against her door, her heart pounding. The Carlos, the rival family Eli had warned her about. They were hunting for Dom's weak spots, and Dom had just called her a priority. Not an asset, not a cover, a priority. She walked to the sofa and sat down, staring at the black phone on the coffee table. She realized then that the kiss had changed everything. It had made her real to him, and being real to Domenico Vescari meant having a target painted on her back. But instead of fear, she felt a strange, warm ache in her chest. He was protecting her. He was changing his entire strategy to keep her safe. She picked up the phone. Her thumb hovered over his name. It was late, past midnight. She typed a message. "Are you okay?" She almost deleted it. It was too personal, too intimate for a business arrangement. She hit send before she could talk herself out of it. The response came 30 seconds later. "I am fine. Why are you awake?" Maya typed back. "Couldn't sleep. Saw the extra guards today. Thank you. Dom, I told you I would keep you safe. Go to sleep." Maya, it was a command, but it felt like a caress. "Maya, you should sleep too. You looked tired the other night." There was a long pause. 3 minutes passed. Maya thought he had put the phone down, then the screen lit up. "I sleep better knowing you are behind a locked door." Maya stared at the words, her breath catching in her throat. It was not an "I love you," but in Dom's language. It was close. It was an admission that her safety was his peace of mind. She curled up on the sofa, clutching the phone to her chest. The line between the arrangement and the reality was gone. She was falling for the monster. And judging by the text glowing on the screen in the dark room, the monster was falling for her. She fell asleep with the phone still in her hand, the screen fading to black as the city rain began to fall outside, washing nothing away. But perhaps, finally, starting something new. The illusion of normalcy shattered on a Tuesday afternoon in the frozen food aisle of a generic grocery store 3 blocks from Maya's new apartment. Maya had insisted on going herself. She told Dom's head of security, a stoic man named Russo, that she needed to feel like a person again, not a prisoner. Russo had reluctantly agreed, though he insisted on a reduced detail, just him and a driver, waiting outside to keep a low profile so she would not draw attention. For 20 minutes, Maya pretended her life was her own. She compared prices on oat milk. She debated between 2 brands of pasta sauce. She hummed along to the tinny pop music playing over the store speakers. It felt blissfully, wonderfully boring. Then, as she reached for a bag of frozen berries, a shadow fell over her cart. "Excuse me," a voice said. It was smooth, but it carried an edge that made the hair on Maya's arms stand up. She turned. 2 men stood behind her, blocking the exit of the narrow aisle. They did not look like shoppers. They wore leather jackets that seemed too heavy for the weather, and their smiles did not reach their eyes. "You are the barista," the first one said, "but you're stepping closer. The one Vescari keeps tucked away in his high tower." Maya's grip tightened on the cold handle of the freezer door. "I think you have the wrong person." "I do not think so," the second man said. He was shorter, with a silver tooth that caught the fluorescent light. "We've seen the pictures. Pretty thing. I can see why Dom likes you. He always did have a soft spot for strays." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She tried to step around them, but the first man shifted his weight, blocking her path. "Do not run off, sweetheart," he sneered. "We just want to send a message to your boyfriend. Tell him the Carlos send their regards, and tell him that pretty little shields like you break real easy." He reached out, his fingers grazing the sleeve of her coat. In that second, the glass facade of the store seemed to explode inward, not with debris, but with noise and motion. "Get back," a voice roared. Russo was there. Maya had not even seen him enter the store, but suddenly he was a wall of muscle between her and the Carlo men. He moved with a violence that was terrifyingly efficient. He shoved the first man back into a display of canned soup, sending metal tins clattering loudly to the linoleum floor. The second man reached for his waistband, but Dom's driver appeared at the end of the aisle, a gun clearly visible beneath his open jacket. Though he did not draw it, the threat was enough. "Move!" Russo barked at Maya, grabbing her upper arm with a grip that bruised. "Now!" He hustled her out of the store, leaving the 2 men scrambling amidst the rolling soup cans. The automatic doors slid open, and the cold air hit Maya's face, but she could not feel it. She was numb. Russo practically threw her into the back of the waiting sedan and slammed the door. "Go," Russo ordered the driver, jumping into the front seat as the car screeched away from the curb, merging aggressively into traffic. Maya curled into the corner of the leather seat. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking uncontrollably. She stared out the tinted window, watching the mundane world. People walking dogs, kids waiting for buses flash by. She realized then with a sickening clarity that she could never go back to that world. She was not just an observer of Dom's life anymore. She was a piece on the board, and pieces got taken. The atmosphere in Dom's office was suffocating. Maya sat on the velvet sofa in the corner, clutching a mug of tea that an assistant had brought her. Her hands were shaking so badly that the liquid rippled in miniature waves. Across the room, Dom was ending a phone call. He was not shouting, which made him infinitely more terrifying. His voice was a low, jagged whisper, like glass grinding under a boot. "I do not care how many men it takes," Dom said into the receiver. "You find out how they knew she was there, and then you burn their operation to the ground. No one touches her. No one even looks at her. Do you understand me?" He slammed the phone down onto the receiver with enough force to crack the plastic housing. He stood there for a moment, his back to her, his hands braced on the mahogany desk. His shoulders were heaving, the tailored fabric of his suit straining against the tension in his muscles. He looked like a man holding back a tidal wave of violence. Then he turned. His eyes found hers instantly. The fury that had been radiating off him vanished the moment he saw her face. He saw the way she was curled in on herself, the way her eyes were wide and glassy with shock. "Maya," he breathed. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. He did not sit on the chair opposite her. He knelt on the floor between her knees, ignoring the expensive fabric of his trousers. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice urgent, scanning her face for bruises. "Did they touch you?" "No," she whispered. "Russo." He got there in time. They talked. Dom let out a breath that sounded like a curse. He reached out, his large hands cupping her shoulders. His grip was firm, grounding, anchoring her to the present moment. "I am sorry," he said, his voice rough with guilt. "I am so sorry, Maya. I should have had 4 men with you. I should never have let you go to that store. It is not your fault," she said, though a small, treacherous part of her whispered that it was. Dom looked at her, his dark eyes filled with a torment she had never seen before. He moved his hands from her shoulders to the base of her neck, his thumbs digging gently into the tight cords of muscle there. He began to rub, a slow, rhythmic motion that melted some of the ice in her veins. "You are safe," he murmured, his gaze locking onto hers. "I swear to you, Maya, I will burn this city to ash before I let them get near you again." The intensity of his promise, the raw heat of his hands on her skin, broke something inside her. The shock gave way to a sudden, overwhelming need for comfort. She shuddered, a sob escaping her throat. Dom did not hesitate. He pulled her forward off the edge of the sofa and into his arms. Maya buried her face in the hollow of his shoulder. She wrapped her arms around his torso, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a spinning world. He smelled of soap, of the expensive tobacco he sometimes smoked, and of something else, something warm and distinctly him. He held her tightly, one hand cradling the back of her head, pressing her closer to his chest. She could feel the rapid thud of his heart against her cheek, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. For a long time, they stayed like that on the floor of his office, the most feared man in the city holding the barista who had accidentally become his weakness. Later that evening, the frantic energy had settled into a quiet, heavy intimacy. Dom had taken her to his private lounge, a secluded room at the back of the building with soundproof walls and a fireplace that cast flickering shadows across the leather furniture. The city lights were just distant pinpricks through the heavy drapes. Maya sat on one end of the sofa, her legs tucked under her. Dom sat close, but not touching, a glass of amber liquid resting untouched on the table before him. "I am scared, Dom," she admitted softly into the silence. Dom looked at her, his profile sharp against the firelight. "You have every right to be." "It is not just the Carlos," she said, picking at a loose thread on her sweater. "I'm scared of what this is turning me into. Today. When Russo hit that man, I was not horrified. I was relieved. I wanted him to hurt them." She looked up at him, her eyes searching. "Does that make me like them? Does that make me bad?" Dom reached out and took her hand. His fingers were rough, warm, and enveloped hers completely. "No," he said firmly. "It makes you human. It makes you a survivor." He looked down at their joined hands, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I hate myself for bringing this to your door," he said, his voice low. "Every day. I tell myself I should send you away. Put you on a plane to somewhere safe, somewhere nobody knows the name Viscari." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "Why don't you?" Dom looked up, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes took her breath away. "Because I am selfish," he whispered. "Because the thought of you not being here, of walking into a room and not seeing you, it feels like dying." The confession hung in the air, heavy and sweet. Maya looked at their intertwined fingers. The simple touch felt more intimate than any grand gesture. It was a lifeline. "I do not want to go," she whispered. Dom's gaze darkened. He shifted, turning his body fully toward her. The air in the room seemed to thicken, the firelight casting a warm glow over his features. "Maya," he warned, a low rumble in his throat. She did not retreat. The fear of the afternoon had burned away, leaving behind a reckless need to feel alive, to feel something other than terror. She moved her hand, sliding it up his forearm, over the crisp fabric of his shirt, until her palm rested against his chest. She could feel the heat radiating off him. "Dom," she said, her voice trembling slightly. He leaned in. He gave her the space to pull back, to stop him, to remember the danger. But she did not move. He closed the distance. This kiss was different from the first. The first had been a question. This was an answer. It was hungry, desperate. His lips captured hers with a searing intensity that made her gasp. Maya made a small sound in her throat and climbed closer, one knee pressing onto the leather cushion between them. She reached up, her hands sliding from his chest to his neck, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. Dom groaned, a low, guttural sound that vibrated against her lips. He abandoned his restraint. One of his hands found her waist, gripping her firmly, while the other braced against the back of the couch, as if he needed to anchor himself to keep from consuming her entirely. They explored each other with a boldness born of adrenaline. His lips traveled from her mouth to her jawline, trailing hot, damp kisses down the sensitive column of her throat. Maya arched into him, her body pressing against the hard wall of his chest, seeking friction, seeking warmth. She felt his hand slide up her back, his fingers splaying wide, pulling her flush against him. She was drowning in him, in the scent and taste and feel of him, and she never wanted to come up for air. But just as the heat threatened to spiral out of control, just as Maya felt herself ready to give him everything, Dom pulled back. He broke the kiss with a sharp intake of breath. He rested his forehead against her shoulder, his breathing ragged and harsh in the quiet room. "Stop," he rasped, though his hands were still clutching her waist. Maya blinked, dazed, her chest heaving. "Dom, I cannot." "I do not want to push you," he murmured into her shoulder. "You are vulnerable. You are scared. I will not be another man who takes advantage of that. I will not have you regret this in the morning." Maya swallowed hard. Her skin felt flushed, her body humming with unspent energy. She pulled back slightly so she could look at his face. His eyes were blown wide, dark with desire but steel with resolve. "I would not regret wanting you," she whispered. Dom closed his eyes briefly, as if her words caused him physical pain. "It is not just about wanting. Maya," he said, opening his eyes, "it is about losing yourself. You are light, I am shadow. If we do this, if we really do this, there is no going back. I will consume you." Maya looked at him, and the truth of his words struck her. She was scared, not of him, but of how easily she could disappear into his world, how easily she could forget the girl who served coffee and worried about rent. "I am scared of that too," she admitted softly. Dom nodded. He slowly released her waist, his hands lingering for a second before dropping away. He sat back, putting a few inches of respectful distance between them. "Then we wait," he said, his voice returning to a semblance of control. "We wait until you are sure." The fragility of that trust was shattered less than an hour later. Maya had gone to the restroom to splash cold water on her face and collect her thoughts. As she walked back down the hallway toward the lounge, she heard voices drifting from an open doorway, Dom's main office. She slowed her steps, not intending to eavesdrop, but the tone of the conversation stopped her. It was Luca. "You are playing a dangerous game, boss," Luca was saying. "The Carlos are escalating because of her." "I know," Dom's voice replied. He sounded tired, detached. "So why keep her?" Luca pressed. "We could pay off the brothers' debt and cut her loose. Send her to another state." "No," Dom said sharply. "She stays." "But it is working, isn't it?" Luca asked, his voice taking on a smug quality. "Using the girl as a shield? The Carlos are focusing everything on her. They are ignoring the shipments coming in through the docks because they are too busy watching the barista. Strategically, it is brilliant." Maya froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Using the girl as a shield. She waited for Dom to deny it. She waited for him to shout at Luca, to tell him he was wrong, that it was about love, or at least affection. Instead, there was a pause. "It has paid off in negotiations," Dom said quietly. His voice was flat, likely trying to appease his aggressive lieutenant, but to Maya, it sounded like a confession. "The distraction has bought us time." Maya did not hear the rest of the sentence. She did not hear Dom add, "But that is over now. I do not care about the shipments anymore." She only heard, "It has paid off." The words hit her like a physical blow, the warmth of the lounge, the tenderness of the kiss, the way he had held her. It all twisted in her stomach. "Nobody would ever marry you." Trevor's voice rose up from the depths of her memory, mocking and cruel. "You are just convenient. You are just a prop. You are a shield." She backed away silently, her hand over her mouth, tears stinging her eyes. She felt foolish. She felt used. She felt like a nobody. The ride home was excruciating. Dom sat beside her in the back of the car, unaware of what she had heard. He seemed to sense her mood shift. However, the air between them, previously charged with heat, was now cold and brittle. When the car pulled up to her building, Dom turned to her. He leaned in, his eyes soft, clearly intending to kiss her goodnight, perhaps on the cheek, or perhaps on the lips again. Maya turned her face away sharply. Dom's lips brushed her cheek, an awkward, glancing contact. He pulled back immediately, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Maya?" he asked. "What is wrong?" She reached for the door handle, refusing to look at him. "I am just tired. Dom, it has been a long day." He watched her, his intelligence working behind his eyes, sensing the lie but unable to find the source. "You are distant. Did I do something?" "No," she lied, her voice hollow. "I just want to go to sleep." She opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air without waiting for his assistance. "Good night," she said over her shoulder. She walked into the lobby, feeling his gaze burning into her back. She did not turn around. Up in her apartment, alone in the dark. The tears finally came. She sat on the floor by the window, hugging her knees to her chest. She pressed her fingers to her lips, trying to scrub away the memory of his kiss. But it lingered. She cried not because she was in danger, but because for a few hours she had believed she was special. And now she felt like she was just a piece of armor to be battered and dented so the king could stay safe. The next morning, the descent continued. Maya was wiping down tables at the cafe, her eyes red and puffy, when a woman in a beige trench coat walked in. She did not order coffee. She walked straight to Maya and flashed a badge. "Maya Ellis?" she asked. "I am Detective Renee Carter. We need to have a routine chat." The routine chat took place at the precinct, in a small, sterile room that smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. Detective Carter was not aggressive. In fact, she was kind. She looked at Maya with pity, which was almost worse than anger. "You seem like a smart girl, Maya," Carter said, sliding a file folder across the metal table. "So I am going to be honest with you. The FBI is circling the Vescari organization. It is not a matter of if they go down, but when—" Maya stared at the folder. She did not open it. "Why are you telling me this? Because when the hammer drops, anyone standing next to Domenico Vescari is going to get crushed," Carter said softly. "And right now, that is you." Maya remained silent, her hands clenched in her lap. "We know about your brother's debt," Carter continued. "We know why you are there, but you do not have to go down with the ship." Carter leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Help us. Maya. Tell us what you hear. Tell us where he keeps the books. If you cooperate, we can offer you protection. Real protection. Not the kind that involves thugs in leather jackets. And we can wipe your brother's slate clean. No prison time, no debt, a fresh start, a clean slate. It was exactly what Dom had promised her. But Dom was a criminal, and Carter was the law." Maya looked at the detective. She felt torn in two. Her heart ached for the man who had held her while she cried, but her mind screamed that he was using her as a human shield. I do not know anything," Maya whispered. Carter sighed. She pulled a business card from her pocket and slid it across the table. "Think about it, but do not think too long. The Carlos are not the only ones coming for him." Maya left the station clutching the card in a shaking hand. The white rectangle of paper felt heavy, like a weapon she did not want to carry. In the days that followed, the silence between Maya and Dom grew into a chasm. Maya stopped answering his calls. When her phone buzzed with his name, she let it ring, watching the screen until it went dark. She texted him brief, impersonal excuses, extra shifts at work, too tired to talk, not feeling well. She avoided the apartment as much as possible, staying late at the cafe or wandering the city with her security detail trailing at a distance. Dom, sensing the shift, tried to bridge the gap. On Friday, a delivery arrived at her apartment. It was a massive bouquet of white lilies, her favorite, though she didn't remember telling him that. Tucked inside was a small, heavy card. She stood at her kitchen counter, staring at the flowers. They were beautiful. They were extravagant. They were a lie. She opened the card. His handwriting was sharp and jagged. "Call me. Please. We need to talk. D." The please broke her heart. It was a word men like Dom never used, but then she heard Luca's voice in her head again, using the girl as a shield. Maya closed the card and set it down on the counter, unopened. She did not call. She walked into her bedroom and closed the door, leaving the flowers to wilt in the silence of the kitchen, while the distance between her and the only man she had ever wanted grew wide enough to bury them both. The silence in the hallway of the apartment building was not peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a lightning strike. Maya had successfully avoided Domenico Vescari for 5 days, dodging his calls and using the back exit of the cafe to evade his drivers. But as she stepped off the elevator on the 10th floor, clutching her purse to her chest, she realized her luck had run out. Dom was leaning against her door. He looked exhausted. The usually impeccable lines of his suit were disrupted by a tie that had been loosened, and there was a shadow of stubble along his jawline. When the elevator doors slid open, his head snapped up. His dark eyes locked onto hers, burning with a mixture of relief and barely suppressed fury. "Stop running, Maya," he said, his voice rough. Maya froze, her hand tightening on her strap. "I am not running. I have been working." "You have been hiding," Dom corrected, pushing himself off the doorframe. He took a step toward her, eating up the space in the narrow corridor. "I have respected your space. I have waited. But my patience is gone. You do not answer my calls. You look at my men like they are jailers. Tell me what I have done." Maya looked at him, really looked at him, and felt her heart crack. He looked so sincere. He looked like a man who was desperate to fix something broken. But she knew better now. She knew the language of men who wanted things. "I heard you," she whispered. Dom stopped, confused. "Heard me? I heard you talking to Luca." she said, her voice trembling but gaining volume. I heard him say that using me as a shield was a brilliant strategy. I heard him say that the Carlos were distracted by the girl, so your shipments were safe. Dom's face went pale beneath his tan. A flash of genuine shock crossed his features. Maya, and you agreed. She cut him off, the tears finally spilling over. You said it paid off. You said the distraction bought you time. Dom let out a sharp curse, dragging a hand through his hair. He looked furious, but not at her. His jaw worked as he fought for control. I was handling Luca, he said, his voice dropping to an intense growl. Luca looks at the world in profit and loss. If I told him I was keeping you safe because I care for you, he would see it as weakness. He would see you as a liability. I had to make him think it was strategy so he would not question the resources I was pouring into your protection. It is a strategy, Maya cried out, backing away until her shoulders hit the wall. That is all I am. Dom, I am leverage. I am a prop to make you look human, and I am a target to make your enemies look the other way. That is not true, Dom insisted, stepping closer, his hands raised in surrender. It is true, she sobbed. You are just like him. You are just like Trevor. The name hung in the air between them. Dom went still. What did you say? He asked quietly. Maya wiped her face aggressively, smearing her mascara. Hating that she was crying in front of him again, Trevor, she choked out. He told me the truth years ago. He said nobody would ever marry me. He said I was plain, boring, and forgettable. He said I was just convenient until something better came along. She looked up at Dom, her eyes wide and shattered. And he was right, wasn't he? You do not see me as someone anyone would really choose. I am just a convenient piece on your chessboard. I am disposable. The silence that followed was deafening. Dom looked as if she had struck him across the face. The anger in his eyes vanished, replaced by a stark, bleeding wound of regret. He stepped forward, his movements slow, telegraphing his intent. He reached out, Mathen, his hands open, wanting to grip her shoulders, to shake the doubt out of her, to hold her together. Maya, no. But as his fingers neared her, she flinched. It was a violent, instinctive recoil. She shrank back against the wall, wrapping her arms around her own torso as if to shield her heart from him. Dom froze. His hands hovered in the air for a second, then dropped to his sides. The rejection hit him harder than a bullet. He looked at his own hands as if they were traitors, then looked back at her with a devastating expression of defeat. I never wanted you to feel disposable, he said, his voice hoarse. He took a breath, steeling himself. You are right about the beginning, he admitted. When I first proposed the arrangement, it was strategic. I needed a face. You needed money. It was cold. It was business. Maya let out a shaky breath, turning her face away. But, Dom continued, taking a half step closer, forcing her to hear him, somewhere along the line. The strategy died. I do not know when it happened. Maybe when you stood up to Luca. Maybe when you cried for your brother. But everything changed. I am not keeping you here to distract the Carlos. Maya, I am keeping you here because the thought of you out there, without me, terrifies me. He waited for her to look at him, but she kept her gaze on the floor. I do not know how to trust you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I do not know how to trust a life built on lies and violence. Dom closed his eyes. He nodded slowly. I understand, he said. He reached into his jacket pocket. Maya flinched again, expecting a weapon, but he pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is the deed to your brother's debt, he said. He tore it in half, then in half again, letting the pieces fall to the carpeted floor. Consider it settled. You owe me nothing. The arrangement is over. Maya looked at the shredded paper, stunned. You are letting me go? I am setting you free, Dom corrected. If you want to leave, you can leave. I will have my men stand down. You can go back to your apartment. You can go back to your life. He looked at her with a fierce intensity. But you need to know something. The Carlos do not care about contracts. They do not care that we are done. They have seen you with me. If I cut you loose, I cannot guarantee they will honor that boundary. I will try to watch you from a distance, but without you close. He trailed off, leaving the threat hanging in the air. Not a threat from him, but a threat from the world he lived in. Maya stared at him. He was giving her what she wanted. He was giving her freedom. And yet, looking at him standing there, proud, hurt, and willing to lose her to save her, she felt a tearing sensation in her chest. Dom turned to walk toward the elevator. His shoulders were heavy, the line of his back rigid. Wait. The word left her mouth before she could stop it. She reached out and grabbed his wrist. Dom stopped instantly. He turned back, and for a second, the mask slipped completely. His face was raw. There was no mafia boss, no strategist. There was just a man who was desperately in love with a woman he knew he could not keep. He looked down at her hand on his wrist, then up at her eyes. "Maya?" he asked, a faint note of hope in his voice. Maya looked at him, her heart hammering. She wanted to pull him close. She wanted to believe him, but the fear was too deep. The voice of her ex was too loud. I just wanted to say thank you," she whispered, "for Eli." The hope in Dom's eyes flickered and died. He gave a sad, resigned smile. He turned his hand over, catching her fingers in his. He lifted her hand slowly, bowing his head. He pressed his lips to her knuckles. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of reverence. It was a goodbye. Be safe. "Maya," he murmured against her skin. He let her hand go. It fell to her side, cold and empty. Dom walked into the elevator. The doors slid shut, cutting him off from her view, and leaving her alone in the hallway with the shredded remains of her brother's debt and a heart that felt heavier than stone. 2 days later, the past came knocking. Maya was walking out of the cafe after a lunch shift. She was exhausted, her eyes constantly darting to the shadows, looking for the security detail that was no longer there. Dom had kept his word. The black sedans were gone. She was alone. Maya? She jumped, spinning around, standing on the sidewalk, looking sheepish and wearing a faded denim jacket. Was Trevor. Her ex-boyfriend looked the same as he always had, handsome in a boyish, unkempt way, with a smile that used to make her knees weak and now just made her stomach turn. "Trevor," she said, taking a step back. "What are you doing here?" "I heard things," Trevor said, holding up his hands. "People talk. Maya, I heard you got mixed up with some bad people. With Vascari. It is none of your business," Maya said, clutching her purse. "I am making it my business," Trevor said, stepping closer. "Look, I know I was a jerk back then. I said things I shouldn't have. But I care about you, Maya. I do not want to see you get hurt." Maya looked at him. He sounded sincere. He looked worried, and in her lonely, frightened state, the familiarity of him was disarming. "I am out of it," she said, "but it is over." "Is it?" Trevor asked, tilting his head. "Guys like Vascari, they do not just let people go. He probably told you he cared about you, right? Made you feel special?" Maya didn't answer, but her expression gave her away. Trevor let out a bitter laugh. "That is the game. Maya, men like that need trophies, but they do not keep them. They use them and toss them. I told you once that nobody would marry you, and I was cruel, but I was trying to prepare you for the real world. You are a sweet girl, but you are not built for his world." The words dug into the exact wound Dom had opened. "Trophies, used, tossed. Let me help you," Trevor said, his voice dropping. "I have a car. I can get you out of town for a while, just until the heat dies down." Maya hesitated. Her instincts were screaming at her. Why was he here now, after 3 years? But the fear of the Carlos was greater than her suspicion of Trevor. I need to go home," she said. "I will walk you," Trevor insisted, "just to make sure you get there. We can talk on the way." He fell into step beside her. Maya kept her distance, walking briskly. They walked for 10 minutes. Trevor kept talking, filling her head with poison. He talked about how Vascari had a reputation for discarding women. He talked about how she would never be safe in this city. As they approached a narrow side street that cut through to her block, Trevor touched her arm. "Hey, let's cut through here," he said. "It is faster." Maya looked at the alley. It was dark, shadowed by high brick walls. "I stick to the main roads." "Trevor," she said, "come on." "Maya," he said, His grip on her arm tightening slightly. "Do not be paranoid. I am with you." He He pulled her. It wasn't a suggestion anymore. Maya tried to pull back. "Trevor, let go. Just walk," he snapped, his voice changing completely. The boyish charm evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard sneer. Maya looked at him, and suddenly she saw him clearly. She saw the sweat on his upper lip. She saw the way he kept checking his phone. "You are working for them," she whispered, horror washing over her. Trevor didn't answer. He shoved her hard toward the mouth of the alley. Two men stepped out from the shadows. They were the same men from the grocery store, the Carlos. "Well done, Trevor," the man with the silver tooth said. "Go get your money." Trevor didn't even look at Maya. He released her arm and scrambled away, disappearing down the street. Maya stumbled back, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She turned to run, but the first man lunged. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her backward. Maya screamed, swinging her heavy tote bag, hitting him in the face. She fought with everything she had. She kicked, scratched, and screamed, fueled by pure terror. "Get her in the van," the silver-toothed man yelled, pointing to a vehicle idling at the other end of the alley. Suddenly, tires screeched. A black SUV roared around the corner, mounting the curb and slamming into the brick wall, cutting off the van. Doors flew open. Dom's men poured out. Russo was there, wielding a baton with terrifying precision. And then Dom was there. He did not look like a boss. He looked like a madman. He had abandoned his gun, sprinting toward her with nothing but desperation in his eyes. "Get down," he roared. One of the Carlo men, panicked by the ambush, pulled a knife. He slashed wildly, not aiming at the guards, but at Maya, the only soft target within reach. Maya saw the glint of steel. She froze. Dom did not. He threw himself forward. He did not try to disarm the man. He simply put his body between the blade and Maya. He tackled her, wrapping his arms around her and twisting in midair so that his back was to the attacker. They hit the pavement hard, tumbling behind a parked car. Maya felt the heavy jolt of Dom's body jerking against hers. She heard him make a sound, a sharp, wet gasp, but he didn't let go. He crushed her against his chest, shielding her head with his hand, curling around her like a protective shell. "Dom?" she gasped, looking up. His face was pale, his teeth grit in pain. "Stay down," he wheezed. Above them, the sounds of fighting intensified. Shouts, the crack of bone, the thud of bodies hitting the ground. Then, silence. "Boss!" Russo's voice yelled. Dom tried to push himself up, but his arm collapsed. He slumped back against the tire of the car. Maya scrambled to her knees. She looked at his side. His white shirt was soaked in red. The knife had caught him in the flank. Just above the hip, the blood was dark and spreading fast. "Dom!" Maya screamed, pressing her hands over the wound. He looked at her, his eyes unfocused. "Are you hurt?" "No," she sobbed, pressing harder on the wound as blood seeped between her fingers. "No, I am fine. You idiot, you are bleeding." "Good," he whispered, his eyes fluttering shut. "You are safe." The private clinic was quiet, a stark contrast to the violence of the alley. It smelled of antiseptic and money. Maya sat in a chair beside the bed, still wearing her blood-stained coat. She refused to take it off. She refused to leave. Dom was asleep. The doctors had stitched him up. A shallow wound, they said, missing the vital organs. But he had lost a lot of blood. He looked pale against the white sheets, the dark stubble on his face standing out sharply. Maya watched his chest rise and fall. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched the bandage wrapped around his torso. He had taken a knife for her. He had come for her, even after she had rejected him, even after she had told him he was just like Trevor. The door opened softly. Detective Renee Carter walked in. She looked tired, holding a cup of coffee. "He's going to make it," Renee said quietly. Maya didn't look up. "I know." Renee walked to the foot of the bed. She looked at Dom with a mixture of distaste and respect. "He saved your life tonight," Renee said, "but next time, he might not be there. Or next time. The knife might go a few inches to the left, and he will be dead." Maya looked up at the detective, her eyes burning. "Why are you here?" "To tell you the truth," Renee said, "the Carlos are not going to stop. They smell blood. As long as Vescari is in power, there is a war. And you are in the middle of it." Renee moved closer. keeping her voice low. "If you want this to end, Maya, you have to help us end it. You have access to him now. You are the only one who can get close enough to find the evidence we need." She placed a card on the bedside table. "Help us put him away. It is the only way to save him from a bullet. And the only way to save yourself." Renee turned and walked out, leaving the words hanging in the sterile air like a poison gas. Maya looked at the card, then back at Dom. He stirred. A low groan escaped his lips. His eyelids fluttered open, heavy and groggy. He blinked, trying to focus. When he saw her, a faint, weak smile touched his lips. "Maya!" he rasped. "Dom," she whispered, leaning forward. He moved his hand on the sheet, searching. Maya reached out and took it. His fingers curled around hers. Weak but possessive, he ran his thumb over the back of her hand, a rhythmic, soothing motion. "I told you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Nobody touches you." Tears blurred Maya's vision. The intimacy of the moment was crushing. He was in pain, drugged and bleeding, and his only thought was her safety. But as she looked at him, she saw the blood on his shirt in her memory. She saw the knife. She saw the never-ending war that Renee had promised. She realized she couldn't do it. She couldn't be the reason he died, and she couldn't be the one who put him in a cage. She squeezed his hand one last time, feeling the warmth of his skin, imprinting the texture of his calluses on her memory. "Rest, Dom," she whispered. She leaned down and pressed a kiss to his forehead. His skin was hot. "I cannot stay." She breathed against his skin. "If I stay, I lose everything." Dom was already drifting back under, the medication pulling him down. He murmured something unintelligible, his grip on her hand slackening. Maya slowly pulled her hand away. She stood up, her legs feeling like lead. She looked at him one last time, the man who had made her feel like a queen and a target all at once. "Goodbye," she whispered. She turned and walked out of the room, past the sleeping security guard, and out into the cool night air. She walked away from the clinic, away from the Viscari Empire, and away from the only love she had ever known, telling herself that breaking her own heart was the only way to keep it beating. The weeks that followed were a gray blur of routine and silence. Maya had moved out of the luxury apartment Dom had provided, leaving the keys on the counter with a note that simply said, "Thank you." She found a small studio on the other side of the city, a place with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that clanked in the middle of the night. It was safe, in the way that being invisible was safe. She took on extra shifts at the cafe, working until her feet ached and her hands smelled permanently of roasted beans. She smiled at customers. She paid her rent. She pretended that the last few months had been a fever dream, but the silence was loud. Every time a black car drove past the cafe window, her heart skipped a beat. Every time her phone buzzed, she hoped, for a split second, that it was him. At night, alone in her cramped room, she would scroll through their old text messages. The thread was short, mostly logistics about pickup times or brief check-ins, but she read them like scripture. "I sleep better knowing you are behind a locked door." She would stare at those words until the screen blurred, her thumb hovering over the call button, but she never pressed it. She'd walked away to save him. Calling him now would just be dragging him back into the line of fire, or so she told herself. On the other side of the city, in a glass-walled office that felt colder than it ever had before, Domenico Viscari was fighting a war on two fronts. The conflict with the Carlos Syndicate had turned into a stalemate of shadow and threat, but the war inside his own head was losing him sleep. "You are making a mistake, boss," Luca said, pacing in front of Dom's desk, pulling the men back from her. "It looks weak. The streets are talking. They say Viscari lost his nerve. They say he got his heart broken and lost his head." "Let them talk," Dom said, not looking up from the paperwork he was ignoring. "If the Carlos think she is unprotected, they will grab her just to spite you," Luca argued. "They think I discarded her," Dom said, his voice ice cold. "They think I got bored and moved on. That makes her worthless to them. If I put guards on her, I paint a target on her back. If I leave her alone, she becomes just another civilian. And if you are wrong, Luca challenged. Dom's pen snapped in his hand. Ink bled onto his fingers, dark as blood. Then I will tear this city down brick by brick until I find her, he whispered. But I would rather she hate me and live than love me and end up in a morgue. Luca shook his head, muttering about sentimentality being the death of kings, and walked out. Dom stared at the ink on his hand. He wiped it off with a tissue, but the stain remained. He knew the rumors, too. The Carlos were planning something big, a strike that would hurt him not just in his wallet, but in his reputation. They were targeting his legitimate face, the businesses he used to wash his money and his name. The illusion of Maya's safety shattered on a Tuesday. She was taking out the trash behind the cafe when she saw him leaning against the brick wall. Trevor. He looked worse than the last time. His eyes were frantic, darting around the alley, and he looked thinner. Maya, he hissed. Maya didn't freeze this time. She stiffened, gripping the heavy bag of coffee grounds like a shield. Get away from me, Trevor. I just need to talk, he said, taking a step forward. His hands were shaking. Listen, people are still asking about you. The Carlos. They are not happy. They think you know things. I do not know anything, Maya said, her voice steady. They do not believe that. Trevor said, Look, they made me an offer. If you just cooperate, if you just tell them where Dom keeps his private records or when he is moving the next shipment, they will let you go. They will let both of us go. Maya looked at him, and for the first time, the fog of her old insecurity lifted completely. She saw him not as the man who had defined her worth, but as a desperate, small man trying to sell her out to save his own skin. He was not worried about her. He was terrified for himself. Cooperate, she repeated. You mean betray him? He is a criminal. Maya, Trevor snapped, the old cruelty bleeding into his tone. He is a monster. You think he cares about you? You are nothing to him. Just like I told you, nobody would ever marry you. Maya, nobody would ever put a ring on a girl like you. You are just a temporary fix. The words hung in the damp air of the alley. Nobody would ever marry you. It used to make her want to curl up and die. It used to make her feel small. Now, it just made her angry. A cold, hard rage settled in her chest. She looked at Trevor, and she didn't see a judge. She saw a coward. You are wrong, she said quietly. She threw the trash bag into the dumpster with a loud thud. Stay away from me, Trevor. If I see you again, I will not call the police. I will call Dom, and you know what he will do. Trevor flinched. The threat landed. He scrambled back, cursing her under his breath, and disappeared down the alley. Maya stood there, breathing hard. She felt a strange sense of power. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the woman who had walked away from a king, and she still held his protection like a hidden blade. 2 days later, the danger moved from the shadows into the light. Maya was cleaning a table near the back of the cafe. It was late, and the shop was nearly empty, save for 2 men in thick coats sitting in the corner booth. They were speaking in low voices, but the acoustics of the empty room carried their words. The Regal Crown, one man muttered. Saturday night, it is a charity gala. The other said with a laugh, high society garbage. Exactly, the first man said, Vascari will be there. Playing the saint. We hit the ballroom, lock the doors. It sends a message. No place is safe. Maya's hand froze on the table. The Regal Crown Hotel. Saturday night. A charity gala. She knew that event. Dom had mentioned it weeks ago. It was his biggest legitimate event of the year. A fundraiser for the city hospital. There would be hundreds of innocent people there. Doctors, donors, families, and the Carlos were planning to turn it into a slaughterhouse. Maya walked calmly to the back room. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was crystal clear. She couldn't call the police. They wouldn't arrive in time to stop a coordinated hit. Or worse, it would turn into a hostage situation. She had to tell Dom. She dug through her purse, her fingers brushing past lip balm and receipts until she found it, the sleek, matte black business card he had given her on that very first night. She dialed the number. It rang once, twice. This is Vascari, a voice said. It wasn't Dom. It was a guard. I need to speak to Dom, Maya said. Who is this? Tell him it is Maya. Tell him the Carlos are hitting the regal crown. There was a pause, then a click. Maya? Dom's voice. It sounded breathless, as if he had run to the phone. Dom, she said, clutching the receiver. I overheard 2 men. They are Carlos. They are planning to hit the charity gala on Saturday. They said they are going to lock the doors. Are you safe? Was his immediate response. Where are you? I am at the cafe. I am fine. But Dom, innocent people are going to be there. I will handle it, Dom said, his voice turning hard. Maya, thank you. Dom, she whispered. Be careful. He didn't answer for a second. I will be at your apartment in 20 minutes. What? No, you cannot. 20 minutes, Maya. Pack a bag. The line went dead. When Dom arrived, he didn't knock. He had a key, likely acquired through means she didn't want to know about, and he let himself in. Maya was standing in the middle of her small room, a bag half packed on the bed. Dom looked different. The bandage was gone, though he moved with a slight stiffness. He looked sharper, harder, but his eyes were burning. He crossed the room and stopped 3 feet from her. He looked at the peeling wallpaper, the single window, the small bed. He looked furious that she was living like this. Why didn't you call? He asked, his voice low. I thought it was better this way, she said. For you. Better for me? Dom let out a harsh laugh. I have not slept in weeks. I have torn apart half the city looking for the men who touched you. And you are here, hiding in a shoebox, protecting me. He stepped closer, invading her space. I pushed you away because I was scared. He admitted. The words torn from him, I thought if I made you hate me, you would be safe, but I was wrong. You are in this. We are in this. Maya looked up at him. The anger she had felt at Trevor, the fear she had felt for the innocent people, it all crystallized into something else. I never stopped thinking about you. She confessed. Dom stared at her. The tension in the room snapped. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. His palm was warm, rough, and familiar. Maya didn't pull away. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. It felt like coming home. It felt like the first deep breath she had taken in a month. Dom, she whispered. He didn't wait. He closed the distance, his mouth finding hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was urgent. It was aching. It was years of what if and weeks of separation poured into a single, breathless collision. Maya made a small sound and wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. Dom's hands bracketed her waist, his grip firm, pulling her body against his until there was no air between them. She could feel his heart hammering against her chest, a frantic rhythm that matched her own. They broke apart for air, panting, foreheads resting against each other. I missed you, Dom groaned, his voice rough. God, I missed you. He kissed her again, deeper this time. His lips trailed along her jaw, down to her throat, stopping at the pulse point that beat wildly beneath her skin. He checked her reaction with every touch, his hands sliding up her back, tangling in her hair. Maya curled her fingers into his shirt, anchoring herself. I want a future, Dom whispered against her skin. Not an arrangement, not a deal, a life, with you. Maya pulled back slightly to look at him. His eyes were dark, vulnerable, and completely open. It will not be safe, he warned. It will not be easy. I am tired of easy, Maya said, and I am tired of being afraid of what I deserve. She rested her hands flat on his chest. I choose this. Dom, I choose you. Dom closed his eyes, letting out a long, shuddering breath. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips, soft and lingering. Then we finish this, he said. The plan was madness. Dom sat at Maya's small kitchen table, sketching the layout of the regal crown ballroom on a napkin. I cannot cancel the gala, he explained. If I do, the Carlos know I am onto them. They will go underground and strike somewhere else, somewhere I cannot control. So we let them come, Maya said. We turn the ballroom into a trap, Dom corrected. I will have my men disguised as waitstaff, as guests. We reinforce the exits. When the Carlos make their move, we will be waiting. And me? Maya asked. You stay here, Dom said instantly, with guards. No, Maya said. Dom looked up. Maya, they expect me to be there, she argued. If I am not by your side, they will get suspicious. They see me as bait. Dom, let me be the bait. Absolutely not. I would rather be there with you than sitting here wondering if you are dead. Maya slammed her hand on the table. I am not hiding anymore. If we are doing this, we are doing it together. Dom stared at her. He saw the resolve in her jaw, the fire in her eyes. He realized, with a mixture of pride and terror, that she was not asking for permission. Fine, he said through gritted teeth, but you follow my instructions exactly. You stay next to me. You do not leave my side. I promise, she said. Saturday arrived with a cold, clear sky. Dom took her to a boutique in the city center. He didn't have his assistant send a selection of dresses. He sat on a velvet ottoman and watched her try them on. Maya chose a gown of emerald green silk. It was structured, elegant and bold. It didn't look like a dress a victim would wear. It looked like armor. When she walked out of the dressing room, Dom stood up. He didn't say a word. He just walked over to her, his eyes devouring her, in the penthouse, as they prepared to leave. The mood was heavy with anticipation. Dom stood behind her in front of the large vanity mirror. He was fastening a diamond necklace around her throat. The cold metal rested against her warm skin. His fingers lingered on the back of her neck, brushing the sensitive skin there. Maya looked at their reflection. They looked like a power couple. They looked untouchable. You are beautiful, Dom said quietly. He placed his hands on her waist, resting his chin briefly on the top of her head. Maya, he started, there is something I need to tell you. If tonight goes wrong, it won't, she said firmly, meeting his eyes in the mirror. Dom smiled. A small, sad thing. Just stay next to me, he said. No matter what you hear, no matter what they say. Do you understand? I understand. She turned around to face him. She reached out and took his hand, sneaking her fingers between his. Let's go, she said. The Regal Crown Hotel was a palace of gold leaf and velvet. The ballroom was packed with the city's elite. Politicians, doctors, socialites, they swirled in a sea of expensive perfume and polite laughter. Maya walked in on Dom's arm. Her head was held high. She felt every eye in the room land on her. That's her. The whispers seemed to say, the mobster's girl, the waitress. She didn't care. She tightened her grip on Dom's arm. He was solid, warm, and real. Dom was scanning the room. His eyes were constantly moving, reading the crowd. Waiters in the corners nodded subtly at him. His men were in position. The Carlos were here. Maya could feel it. The air felt charged, like the pressure drop before a storm. Dom guided her toward the edge of the dance floor. He kept his hand on the small of her back, a constant, grounding weight. Stay calm, he murmured. Almost time. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from behind a pillar. Well, isn't this a touching reunion? Trevor. He was wearing a tuxedo that didn't fit him quite right. He was smiling, but his eyes were dead. He was standing with 3 other men, large, menacing men who clearly were not guests. Maya felt Dom stiffen beside her. Trevor, Dom said, his voice terrifyingly calm. You are a long way from the alley. I moved up in the world. Trevor sneered. The Carlos appreciate talent, unlike you. He looked at Maya. His gaze was oily, sliding over the green dress. You clean up nice. Maya, he said. But it is just a costume, isn't it? Underneath, you are still the same desperate girl who begged me to stay. Maya didn't flinch. She looked him dead in the eye. I never begged you for anything. Trevor, I just didn't know I deserved better. Trevor's smile faltered. He stepped closer. You think he is going to save you? He spat. He is using you, just like I did. You are a pass-around toy. Maya, nobody would ever truly commit to you. You are damaged goods. The old line. Nobody would ever marry you. Maya felt the sting of tears, but she blinked them back. She opened her mouth to speak, to tell him he couldn't hurt her anymore. But Trevor wasn't done. He raised his voice, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. He said nobody would marry me, she choked out, the memory and the moment colliding. That was the signal. The lights in the ballroom flickered and died. A gunshot cracked through the air. Screams erupted. The crowd surged in panic. "Get down!" Dom roared, pulling Maya behind him. The three men with Trevor drew weapons, but before they could aim, the waiters dropped their trays and drew their own guns. Vescari men emerged from the shadows. A standoff formed in the center of the ballroom. The guests were cowering on the floor. The Carlo men were surrounded, but they had position. Trevor, realizing he was trapped, grabbed Maya's arm. He yanked her away from Dom, spinning her around and pressing a gun to her temple. "Back off," Trevor screamed, his voice cracking. "Back off or I paint the walls with her." Dom froze. His men froze. The Carlo leader, a man named Vic, stepped forward from the group. "Looks like we have a stalemate, Vescari." Vic laughed. "But we have the girl, and we know she is your weakness." Dom stood in the center of the chaos. His hands were raised slightly, palms out. His face was a mask of deadly calm. "Let her go." "Trevor," Dom said softly. "She is nothing." Trevor yelled, the gun shaking against Maya's skin. "She is a nobody. You think you're going to die for a barista?" Dom's eyes locked onto Maya's. He saw the terror in her face, but he also saw the trust. He took a breath, and then his voice rang out, clear and commanding over the screams and the chaos. "Let my wife go." The silence that followed was absolute. Trevor blinked. "Wife?" the crowd murmured. The Carlo men faltered, confused. Dom didn't look away from Maya. "She is not a nobody," Dom said, his voice rising, filled with a power that shook the room. "She is my wife, and anyone who touches her answers to me." He took a step forward. "She is not leverage. She is my life. Now let her go, or I will kill you where you stand." The declaration hung in the air. Wife. It wasn't true. Not legally, not yet. But the way he said it made it the truest thing in the world. It was a claim, a vow. Trevor's hand wavered. The psychological shock of Dom's absolute commitment shattered his resolve. That split second was all Dom needed. "Now," he shouted. Maya dropped her weight, stomping on Trevor's foot with her heel and throwing her elbow back into his stomach. Trevor doubled over. The gun went off, the bullet hitting the ceiling. Dom lunged. He tackled Trevor, knocking the gun away. The room erupted into chaos as Dom's men moved in, disarming the Carlo faction. But Maya didn't see any of it. She was on the floor, breathless, looking at Dom. He was standing over Trevor, his chest heaving. He looked up, finding her in the crowd. He didn't care about the police sirens wailing in the distance. He didn't care about the ruin of his reputation. He walked over to her, pulled her up from the floor, and kissed her, hard, possessive, and public, in front of the entire city, and for the first time in her life. Maya knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she belonged. The Regal Crown Hotel was a monument to excess, a towering structure of glass and gold that dominated the skyline of Grey Ridge. Inside the grand ballroom, the air shimmered with the heat of 1,000 bodies and the scent of expensive perfume. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a warm, flattering light on the city's elite. Senators rubbed shoulders with real estate tycoons, and socialites laughed over flutes of champagne, all of them pretending they did not know that the man walking through the double doors was the city's most dangerous criminal. Maya walked in on Dom's arm. She wore the emerald green silk dress they had chosen together, the fabric moving like liquid around her legs. Her hair was swept up, exposing the delicate line of her neck and the diamond necklace Dom had fastened there only an hour ago. She felt beautiful, but beneath the silk and the gems, her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Every eye in the room seemed to turn toward them. The whispers started immediately, a low, buzzing hum that followed them like a draft. "That is her, the barista. Can you believe he brought her here? Vescari's girl. She looks terrified." Maya tightened her grip on Dom's arm, her fingers digging into the fabric of his tuxedo. She felt the urge to shrink, to hunch her shoulders and disappear, but she remembered the reflection in the mirror at the penthouse. She remembered Dom's hands on her waist. his promise that they were doing this together. She inhaled a sharp breath and lifted her chin. She did not look at the floor. She looked straight ahead, meeting the gazes of the people staring at her until they were the ones who looked away. Dom's hand rested at the small of her back, a warm, heavy weight that grounded her to the earth. "You are doing perfectly," he murmured, his voice low and rough near her ear. "Just keep breathing." "I am breathing," she whispered back, though her lungs felt tight. They moved through the crowd, a shark and his companion swimming through a school of tropical fish. But as they walked, Maya felt the tension in Dom's body shift. The muscles in his arm hardened. His pace slowed imperceptibly. Dom was not looking at the guests. He was looking at the edges of the room. He saw a waiter near the kitchen doors wiping sweat from his forehead with a shaking hand, his eyes darting nervously toward the exits. He saw a security guard by the east wall whom he did not recognize, a man with a scar over his eyebrow and a stance that was too aggressive for a charity gala. He saw the subtle hand signals being exchanged in the shadowed corners of the ballroom. The Carlos were here, and they were already in position. Dom raised his hand to his ear, tapping the tiny, invisible earpiece he wore. "North exit is compromised," he murmured, his lips barely moving. "Russo, take the east wall." "Do not engage until I give the signal," Maya heard him. She looked up at his face, seeing the mask of the polite businessman slip away to reveal the predator underneath. She scanned the crowd, and suddenly, the glittering ballroom looked different. It was no longer a party. It was a chessboard, and she was standing in the middle of the kill zone. "Stay close," Dom ordered softly, pulling her flush against his side. "No matter what happens, you do not let go of me. I won't," she promised. They reached the edge of the dance floor. The music was loud, a swelling orchestral piece that masked the sound of boots shifting on marble. "Well, look at this. Cinderella made it to the ball." The voice was familiar, and it made Maya's blood run cold. She turned to see Trevor standing near a pillar. He was wearing a tuxedo that looked rented, the sleeves slightly too long, but his expression was one of arrogant triumph. He was flanked by 3 large men who were clearly not there for the charity auction. "Trevor," Maya said, her voice steady despite the nausea churning in her stomach, "you look expensive." "Maya," Trevor sneered, his eyes raking over her dress with a look of ownership that made her skin crawl. "Vascari really polished you up, but we both know it is just paint on a crumbling wall." Dom stepped forward, placing himself partially between Maya and Trevor. "Walk away." "Trevor," Dom said. His voice was terrifyingly calm, a low rumble that vibrated in the air. "This is your last chance to live through the night." Trevor laughed, but it was a brittle, nervous sound. He looked at the men behind him for reassurance. "I am not the one who should be worried. Vascari, the Carlos are tired of you running this city, and they are tired of your little pet distraction." He looked at Maya, his lip curling. "You really think he cares about you?" Trevor asked, his voice dripping with venom. "You are still the same pathetic girl I left in that apartment, the one who begged for scraps of affection. You are just being passed along from one user to another. Nobody would truly commit to you. Maya, you are damaged goods." The words hit Maya with the force of a physical blow. The ballroom blurred. The music seemed to fade into a dull roar. Suddenly, she wasn't in a gown. She was back in her old hallway, crying, begging him to explain why she wasn't enough. The old wound ripped open, raw and bleeding. "He said nobody would marry me," she choked out. Her voice was trembling so hard she could barely speak the words. She looked at Dom, her eyes wide and glassy with the memory of that pain. "He said I was nothing," she whispered. Dom looked down at her. He saw the devastation in her face. He saw the way Trevor's words had shattered her confidence in a single second. And the fury that rose up in him was not cold. It was a roaring, inferno hot rage. That was the trigger. Trevor saw the look in Dom's eyes, and panic flickered across his face. He raised his hand to signal his men. "Now!" Trevor yelled, The ballroom lights flickered and died, plunging the room into screaming darkness. A single gunshot cracked through the air, loud, sharp, and terrifying. Chaos erupted. Hundreds of guests screamed in unison, dropping to the floor or stampeding toward the exits. Dom moved instantly. He grabbed Maya, spinning her behind him, reaching for the gun holstered beneath his jacket. But the Carlos were ready. From the darkness, a heavy hand grabbed Maya's arm, wrenching her away from Dom's grip. She screamed, kicking out, but she was shoved violently forward. The emergency lights flickered on, casting the room in a ghostly, red-tinged gloom. The scene was a nightmare. The center of the ballroom had cleared. On one side stood Dom, his gun drawn, his men flanking him with weapons raised. On the other side stood the Carlo faction, guns pointed back. And in the middle, held by a massive gunman with a thick neck and dead eyes, was Maya. The gunman had one arm wrapped around her throat, crushing her windpipe. The cold metal of a pistol was pressed hard against her temple. "Drop the gun! Vescari!" the gunman roared, "or I spill her brains all over this nice floor." Dom froze. His arm remained extended, his aim steady on the gunman's head. But he did not fire. He could not risk it. Maya clawed at the arm around her neck, gasping for air. Her eyes found Dom's. He looked like a statue carved from grief and rage. Vic, the leader of the Carlo attack team, stepped forward, laughing. "Look at that," Vic mocked. "The king of Grey Ridge, brought to his knees by a piece of skirt. Trevor was right. She is nothing but a throwaway, a weakness." Trevor stepped out from behind Vic, emboldened by Maya's capture. He pointed a shaking finger at her. "I told you," he shouted, his voice echoing over the whimpering crowd. "Nobody wants you for the long haul. Maya, you are just a placeholder." Dom's expression changed. The panic that had been edging into his eyes vanished, replaced by a clarity that was absolute and terrifying. He lowered his gun 1 inch. He did not look at the gunman. He did not look at Vic. He looked straight at Maya. He saw the terror in her eyes, but he also saw the question. "Is it true? Am I just a weakness?" Dom took a deep breath. His voice rang out, cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Let my wife go." The silence that slammed into the room was heavier than the gunshot had been. Maya froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The word hung in the air, shimmering and impossible. "Wife." Trevor's mouth fell open. Vic blinked, confused. The crowd, cowering under tables, went silent. Dom took a step forward, his hands raised slightly, but his gaze deadly. "She is not a throwaway," Dom declared, his voice rising, filled with a ferocious pride. "She's not a distraction. She is my wife." He looked at the gunman holding her. "Anyone who touches her, touches me. Anyone who hurts her, destroys their own future. She is not leverage. She is the only thing in this room that matters." The declaration hit the room like a physical force. It shifted the entire reality of the standoff. He wasn't bargaining for a hostage. He was demanding the return of his other half. The gunman faltered. He looked at Dom's face and saw a man who was willing to burn the world down. The doubt crept in. The barrel of the gun wavered just a fraction of an inch away from Maya's head. That was the opening. "Now," Dom roared. Maya didn't think. She reacted, fueled by the adrenaline of Dom's words and the rage she had been suppressing for years. She drove her elbow back with every ounce of strength she possessed. It connected solidly with the gunman's ribs. The man grunted, his grip loosening for a split second. Maya dropped her weight, ducking down and scrambling away. Russo, who'd been inching closer during the speech, launched himself through the air. He tackled the gunman, driving him to the marble floor. Gunfire erupted, but the psychological tide had turned. The Carlo men were rattled, hesitant. Dom's men were focused and fierce. Dom didn't fire. He sprinted through the crossfire, sliding on his knees to where Maya was crouched on the floor. He threw his body over hers, shielding her completely as bullets chipped the marble pillar above them. "Stay down," he shouted, pressing her face into his chest. The firefight lasted less than 30 seconds. Dom's men, positioned perfectly and fighting with the fury of their boss, disarmed the attackers. Trevor was on the ground, zip-tied and crying. Vic was unconscious. Then, A new sound cut through the air. Sirens, dozens of them. The doors burst open, SWAT teams poured in, shouting orders. Police, drop your weapons. The era of the Viscari Empire was ending. Dom knew it. He had known it the moment he decided to stay and fight rather than run. He slowly holstered his gun. He stood up, pulling Maya with him. He looked at her. Her hair was messy, her dress was torn at the shoulder, but she was alive. She was safe. Dom, she wept. Grabbing his lapels, "They are going to take you." "I know," he said calmly. He cupped her face in his hands, wiping away a smudge of dirt from her cheek with his thumb. "Do not be afraid," he whispered. "This is just the beginning." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. It was not a kiss of goodbye. It was a seal, a promise. He turned and held his hands out to the approaching officers. He did not look ashamed. He looked like a man who had won the only battle that mattered. Detective Renee Carter walked through the line of police. She stopped in front of Maya. She looked at the devastation in the room, then at the man being led away in handcuffs, and finally at Maya. She didn't see a victim. She saw a woman standing tall in a ruined dress, her eyes clear and fierce. "He made a choice," Renee said quietly. Maya watched Dom disappear through the doors. "We both did," she replied. 6 months later. The visitation room at the federal facility was cold, painted a sterile gray that sucked the color out of everything. Maya sat on a metal stool, her hands resting on the stainless steel table. She wore a simple white sweater and jeans. She looked tired, but the anxiety that had plagued her for years was gone. The door on the other side opened. Dom walked in. He wore a standard-issue uniform, but he wore it with the same dignity he had worn his tailored suits. He looked healthy. The stress lines around his eyes had softened. He sat down across from her. He placed his hands on the table, palms up. Maya reached out and laid her hands in his. His skin was cool, but his grip was firm. They sat in silence for a moment, just breathing in the presence of the other. "The plea deal is finalized," Dom said softly. 5 years, with good behavior and the cooperation I am giving them on the corruption inside the city council. Maybe 3. 3 years, Maya repeated. It sounded like a lifetime, and yet it sounded like nothing at all. "I can wait," she said. Dom looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face. "There is something else," he said. He hesitated, looking almost shy for the first time since she had known him, before the gala, before the chaos. "I had my lawyers draw up some papers." Maya frowned. "What papers?" Dom took a breath. "Marriage papers." Maya's eyes widened. She pulled her hands back slightly. "You did what?" "It was for your protection," Dom added quickly. "If something happened to me, I wanted to make sure you had legal standing. I wanted my assets to go to you, not the state. I wanted you to be safe. That is why I called you my wife that night. I had already signed the intent." He looked down at the table. "I never asked you properly because I was a coward. I was afraid you would say no. I was afraid you would think it was just another part of the arrangement." He looked up again, his gaze intense. "But the arrangement is gone. Maya, the empire is gone. I am not a boss anymore. I am just a man with a number on his chest." His voice wavered slightly. "When I walk out of here, I want to build a life. Something clean, something boring, something real." He reached across the table again, his fingers brushing hers. "Will you build it with me?" Maya looked at him. She heard the echo of Trevor's voice one last time. "Nobody would ever marry you." It sounded like a joke now, a distant, pathetic lie. She smiled, and tears spilled over her cheeks. "I already chose you. Dom," she whispered. "I chose you the night I walked into your office. I chose you in the alley. I chose you at the gala." She turned her hand over, interlacing her fingers with his. "I choose you now," she said clearly. "And I will choose you every day for the rest of my life." 3 years and 2 months later. The courthouse was a small brick building in a town 3 hours away from Gray Ridge. There were no chandeliers. There were no armed guards. There was just a bored clerk, a justice of the peace with a kind smile, and 2 witnesses, Russo, who had retired to open a bakery, and Eli, who looked healthy and sober. Dom wore a suit he had bought off the rack. It fit him perfectly. Maya wore a simple white dress that came to her knees. She held a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the side of the road. It was not a spectacle. It was quiet. It was sacred. Dom's hands were trembling as he held the simple gold band. "Maya," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "with this ring, I give you everything I am, the past, the present, and the future." He slid the ring onto her finger. It felt heavy and right. Maya took his hand. Her own hand was steady. "With this ring," she promised, "I give you my trust, my heart, and my home." They kissed. It wasn't a desperate kiss in a dark office or a defiant kiss in a war zone. It was a kiss of peace. That evening, the sun set over their new apartment. It was small, smaller than the bathroom in Dom's old penthouse. The furniture was mismatched. The view was of a parking lot, not the city's skyline, but it was theirs. Dom turned on a small Bluetooth speaker in the corner of the living room. A slow, soft jazz song began to play. He walked over to Maya, who was standing by the window looking at the gold band on her finger. "Dance with me, Mrs. Viscari?" he asked softly. Maya smiled, turning to him. She stepped into his arms. Dom's hands settled at her waist, his thumbs drawing gentle circles on the fabric of her dress. Maya looped her arms around his neck, resting her cheek against his chest. She closed her eyes, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. They swayed together in the fading light, two survivors who had found a raft in the storm. "Dom," Maya murmured against his shirt. "Once upon a time," she said softly, "someone told me that nobody would ever marry me." Dom stopped moving. He pulled back slightly, tilting her face up with a finger under her chin. He looked into her eyes, and she saw the same fierce, protective fire that had saved her life, now tempered into a warm, enduring light. He brushed his thumb over the wedding ring on her finger. "They were wrong," he whispered. He kissed her, unhurried, tender, and full of everything they had survived, and as they continued to sway together in the quiet of their simple home, Maya knew that for the first time in her life, she was fully chosen, she was fully seen, and she was finally, truly loved. Thank you so much for listening to He Said Nobody Would Marry Me. She cried until the mafia boss called her his wife in public. I hope this story touched your heart and reminded you that you are worthy of a love that fights for you. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment down below with your country or city. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed Maya and Dom's journey, please make sure to subscribe to the Mafia Romance Stories channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode. And finally, share your thoughts in the comments in English. Did you like the ending? What was your favorite part? I read every single comment and I cannot wait to hear from you. Until next time, take care.